Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. Teisho, the root of great faith. Welcome to January 19th, 2025. If you think back, would you have ever thought of this date before being here? Oh, what will I do on January 19th, 2025? Have experience of sublime samadhi or excruciating pain? Either one, okay, right? But here we are. There's no koan today. Today is the opportunity for me to lecture, to speak, to get myself in trouble by addressing what comes to mind. And it's very interesting what comes to mind. Of course, the quote I selected from Dr. Martin Luther King is one of many quotes that are attributed to him. This is actually his, and it's important to make that connection. And I'd like to speak about Dr. King like I do every year that I have the opportunity to be here at Martin Luther King Sesshin. So, I've said it many times before, and I will repeat it today just so we are clear about it. This is not that, why is it, you might ask, why is it that this Zen Buddhist place has a Martin Luther King Sesshin? Yeah, well, partially it is because, well, we live in the United States of America. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a very important figure in what happened here in this country. But also because he is, at least in my estimate, somebody who we'd call a 20th century bodhisattva. Not necessarily a Buddhist bodhisattva, because, you know, there is no union card for bodhisattvaship that you have to take out. It is a way how somebody lives, how a person manifests themselves. And if that originates in their faith, that is based upon teaching A or teaching B or no teaching, none of that matters. Bodhisattva is an activity. Bodhisattvahood is being active. There are many other words in other cultures, in other religions that point to it. Well, saint is not such a great word, but somebody who acts selflessly. Well, we have many present, former, and future Christians here. Can you offer me a word for bodhisattva in the Christian context? I'm sure there is one. But if we think of the Jewish context, even culturally, you know what word comes to mind? Mensch. Yeah, Mensch. Oh, what a Mensch. And Mensch, of course, in German, just, you know what it means? Human. Plainly human. Oh, what a human being. What a human being. So the intent here, speaking about Dr. King and everything that surrounds him, is not indeed as an attempt to appropriate Dr. King for us under this Buddhist banner. No, it is just to point out that we can find, of course, how could it be any other way, this human kernel and seed of great humanity, unrelated to where one is born, where one grows up, what kind of skin we have, what kind of hair, how tall we are, how much we weigh, what gender, what identification we put on ourselves. And that is what all of this is about. So, why did I select this faith quote? Just yesterday we heard about Kyozan Eijaku saying, I don't even believe in truth or in seeking for truth. Well, because that already means I would have to unconditionally accept that there is truth. So I just go for the seeking. We often hear that faith, Zen, you do not have to believe in anything to do this. You can believe whatever you want, as long as you engage in the activity of this investigation. But what that points out is that faith and belief are not necessarily the same. They are not the same. So, what do we have to say about faith? Again, just so you know, there will be a loud noise. What just happened? This drop, right? What is it called? Gravity. Gravity. Every morning you get up, you take gravity for granted. Unless, well, maybe one of us was lying in their bed this morning, holding on to the sides of the bed. Should I get out or not? Will this earth hold me onto it or not? Or will I just be flicked off into space and become a piece of space junk? Nobody thinks that way, you know? Because we have utter faith in gravity. How is that so? How is that so? How have we come to that deep, deep faith that is unshakable?
Experience.
Yeah, and life. Unless one of us has spent some time in outer space during their lifetime, every day of our lives, gravity has been telling each of our cells in our bodies, I'm going to hold on to you. You do not have to be afraid. So, great faith in the Zen tradition is exactly the same thing. It is not something that appears after, oh, I read this sounds good. I have faith in this. Yeah, that is one superficial kind of faith. But sitting here on the cushion you're sitting on, with your own buttocks, is where faith is generated, where faith is experienced and cultivated. And it's not an understanding. An understanding up here is not enough. An understanding that is an understanding on a cellular level, through consistent practice, through consistent experience of this activity. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. It's a wonderful expression, you know. First of all, we don't have to be afraid if we walk carefully, because it's true, the same with faith and with gravity. It takes skill to live with it, and it takes skill to apply it to a life in a good way. Gravity works without will and desire. When I held up this saucer and I let it go, it just fell. It's not because there's somebody sitting in the middle of the earth saying, I want that saucer. Give it to me. There's no will behind it. There's no desire of the saucer to fall to the ground either. It just works. It just works. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. This is an expression, when I look at it, that points us to the process of practicing, of living in an awakened way, of living in an intentional way. Intention as not thinking about what is at the top of this staircase, you know? What do I want to reach when I get to the top of the staircase? But just beginning to take the first step. We never know. Sometimes, you know, it might be one of those circular staircases, yeah? Never know until you get there. But faith, that great root of faith, is based in the cellular level of experience. Earlier I spoke about liberation. We all want to be liberated. Dr. King once said about the African Americans here in the United States, speaking to his fellow people, he said, we know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. When we sit here, we might experience and encounter one of those oppressors. Who can name that oppressor?
Water.
Yeah, that's a relative, very close relative of that oppressor.
Ego?
I don't want to sit here. I am cold. I am hungry. I am almost enlightened. All of these are oppressive identities and thoughts, you know, that inhibit our freedom, prescribing to be this way or that way. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Who is the oppressed? Nobody, apparently. So what's the problem? Let's all go home.
The spirit?
It doesn't even have to be named, right? You can name it the spirit. You can name it your natural being. You're a natural being that flows freely just without having to name itself this or that. And just right into the same kind of thought goes the next quote that Dr. King said, "What matters is not how long you live, but how you live." How. Sometimes we arrive here at a practice like this and we think, okay, what do I have, what do I have to change in my life to be able to grasp this Zen experience? I should become ordained. I will become a vegetarian. I will never swear again. Fuck. You know? All of that seems so strange that, well, you find out after some time, it's not what you do, but how you do it. How you do it. We learn the how here. Length, amount, quantification is not applicable to this kind of way of life. But quality, it's about quality of presence, quality of clarity, sometimes even quality of confusion, quality of pain. You want that pain to be real pain and not just half-assed. You want to be not just half bored. You want to be completely bored, 100%. When we fail, we ought to fail completely. All of that goes into that. I think one of the other really, really big things that we learn here in this practice is that actually sometimes we come here and we have to learn something new. But what we do here most of the time is undoing things that we've been holding on to for a long time. Undoing, forgetting things, not being attached to, letting go. And there's something that brings us here, that we have some kind of a longing for completeness, for peace, for clarity, for a quality in our lives that we do not feel at the time. And sitting up there in that Doksan room, people come in, people leave. But what I notice more and more is what is true about Zen practitioners. Sitting here doing Zazen, we become permeable. We become permeable and we engage in this kind of osmosis of taking in whatever the world around us presents. And it's a wonderful thing at times, but it also means that we have to develop the ability not just to take in what the world offers or what the vibes are, but that we learn how to transform them so they don't get stuck. We become like sponges, that just suck everything in. And it can't stay like that. We must be more like an organ, like a liver, that takes these sometimes toxic things from the outside world, from human nature, and transforms them in various innocuous ways. The greatest example of that, if you have ever seen, you might find in the Tibetan tradition, in Tibetan Buddhism, in Vajrayana, but probably going back to the local Bon or Burn religion in Tibet, that peacocks are revered. Why? There are peacock feathers there. You know, peacocks, they eat seeds. They even eat the seeds that contain cyanide, which usually kills other living beings. But the peacocks have become so adapted to it that they take the cyanide and metabolize it into the blue, shiny pigment that you see in their feathers. So taking that, what appears to be toxic and life eliminating cyanide and turning it into those wonderful colors is a process that we can aspire to do spiritually. We sit here and we are amidst a political situation where there are very, very strong opposites. There are different clans, and there are clans within the clans, and there are clan leaders. And we have to live within all of that. Our neighbor might be somebody who voted for this clan leader, or not at all, or for the other clan leader. The people we interact with on a daily basis might be convinced that this was the best thing that could ever happen to this country. It's very, very seductive to fall into that dilemma, this duality, and just say, no, I have to pick one side. It's very, very easy to do that because that's how our mind works. That's how our mind works. If it's not this, it has to be that. Good and evil, always depending on where you stand. So even when Dr. King says something like, the time is always right to do what is right, that very much depends on where you stand and which direction you look. And so I've thought a lot since the people of this country voted. What am I going to do here? What can I say about this without just reinforcing an artificial split? Well, is it upsetting? Oh, for many it is. Is it disturbing? Oh yes, of course it is disturbing. What would not be disturbing about a group of people calling the others worthless, invaders, or whatever, deplorables? It doesn't matter from which side that comes. And so looking at this whole situation, I ask myself, what can I say about this? What can we as practitioners do about it? And I talked a little bit, I wrote a few lines in that New Year's letter that I was asked to write. And it's not easy, Paul. You have 420 words. Write something that is apropos. So there's more than 420 words that we can spend on this topic. And it's important for us practitioners to consider all of this, because what is our practice? Life. Life. And every encounter we have in our lives with society, with each other, with whoever appears in front of us. When something terrible is being proposed, should we oppose it? Let's take a poll. Anybody wants to oppose it?
Yes.
Yeah, we got to do something. Got to do something about it. We can't just watch. But how and what we do, we have to learn how to do it skillfully. Skillfully in a way that we don't just inflict the same injustice or the same splitting this world into two onto those who split the world to begin with. When we hack what is there again in two, in the end we'll end up with a lot of splinters. Not one great Mahasangha that includes everybody. So how do we do that? How do we do that? And as ineffective as it might seem to you, is our getting together here and sitting together and fathoming the actual cause for this is a very important step. So, what is the actual cause of this? You might ask. There's one underlying condition that is the cause of this. Who can name it? Ignorance. That's one aspect of it, yeah? Ignorance is one aspect of it.
Delusion.
Delusion, another wonderful aspect. Others? Oh, it's their fault?
The illusion of others.
Okay, the illusion of others. Yeah, this describes some sides of this elephant. But who or what is the elephant? Human nature. Human nature. We are just built that way. We have just arrived at the time in evolution that this is the basis upon all of the wonderful and the unspeakable originates. So us looking at our own human nature, elucidates, enlightens, lights up an understanding that makes it very, very different how we proceed in a situation like this. How can you describe the political history of those elections every 4 years, or even every 2 years? The populace votes out the bums and votes in another set of bums. then 2 years later, half of the bumps will be voted out. And another 2 years later, it goes back and forth, back and forth. It's never right. It's never right. And one side and the other side, as soon as we have that, and we feed into that, you know what it is? Same thing over and over again. Is there a word for that in the teaching of Buddhism? Samsara. Don't we enjoy samsara? Ooh. For some rounds it's okay, but then it gets pretty old pretty soon. So samsara, that's why we have a practice like this. So, what do we do when we encounter our human nature? Do we oppose it? We examine it. We examine it. We become intimately familiar with it. And not only with it, but also with that human condition that is in all of us, that manifests in all of us. There are functions and processes in there that are very similar to gravity, that just work without will and desire, and maybe don't have the best outcome sometimes. I'm sure you have experienced the not so liked effects of gravity, you know? You trip. You age. Gravity, gravity, gravity. Same with human nature. So examining it. And first of all, with the examination is we have to make a relationship with all of it. All of it. Even the horrible parts that we like to lock away in some kind of closet, you know, that has a big sign on it. Do not open. Right? It's hard to do that. It's hard to do that. But we have to. So. And this is one quote from Dr. King that fits right here. Courage is the power of the mind to overcome fear. So if in this process of examining the human nature and the nature of this universe, you experience fear, you might think, oh, something's wrong here. I shouldn't be happening. Just the opposite. It's important to be able to experience that fear. And it is important to meet that fear. Because that fear is just the opposite of gravity. It's something that pushes you away. It pushes you away from where you're meant to go. So don't be fearful when you encounter parts of yourself in this practice that you rather not look at. It's okay. Courage is the power to overcome the fear. In taking the first step up the staircase, we overcome the fear of not knowing. So having fear is just another sign for us to know, yes, I am a human being. If anyone says they have no fear, be careful. And if it gets dark in that staircase, fearful and dark, remember Dr. King saying, only in darkness can you see the stars. let's not be too serious, right? You know, I was born in Austria, right? And I come over here, and in the beginning, I have adapted a little bit, so my English is better than it used to be when I came. So, but people used to say to me, "Oh, you are German," and so I had to say, "No, I'm not German. I'm Austrian." And they say, "Oh, what's the difference?" And I say, "There's a big difference between Austrians and Germans." And I have taken to explaining it the following way. Let's say there is a disaster. In Germany, on the TV or the radio, the announcer would go, "Ladies and gentlemen, the situation is serious but not hopeless." In Austrian terms, the radio would come on and somebody say, "Hey folks, the situation is hopeless, but not serious." And this is how I would want everybody to look at this practice and at this being a human being. You know, it is hopeless in the sense that we'll never be any other than a human being, you know. So let's not be too serious about it in the sense that we dwell on the limitations and not even take the time to liberate ourselves within that confine that we have, the confines that we are born into, the culture, the body, the mind, but to develop the greatest amount of freedom that we can within those confines. And beyond that, when we sit down here and you really lose yourself in the breath, in the chanting, or just completely disappear, there's no limit at all. No limit at all. But the letdown is that once there's no limit at all, there's nobody to see it. There's nobody to experience it. Gone. Completely gone. So, again, a letdown. The dynamic, though, the journey, the way, the path, Dao, Michi, Do, the commute from this moment to this moment to this moment. That is the journey. That is the pilgrimage we are on. And it will bring us through times like these, where we might encounter things that we don't agree with, and where we have to be very skillful in how we set a different example. And that's the main point that I want to make in this context. Embodying the maturity to not participate in the splitting of the world into divisions. The true embodiment in our actions, in our speech, in our thoughts of indivisibility. We are all one. This world is all one. There are no others. Others are just a convenience to blame, to cut, to hurt. So this indivisibility manifested in our aspirations. And of course, we can't just clap our hands and say, "Oh yeah," and everybody will follow that. It's not going to go that way. Dr. King understood that. It wouldn't be easy to turn a nation that was built upon the exploitation of one group of people. It's not really just one group, of many, many different groups of people by the few. It's not easy to do quickly. It has to be done painstakingly. And so he said about himself, if I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way. And the great way of doing things from a point of view of a Buddhist practitioner is to do it in the realm of non-duality, of that oneness of self and other, of that bringing together, of that underlying unity and indivisibility that we can manifest in our actions, in our thoughts, in our speech. Little things. Just because somebody disagrees with us, in whatever way, substantially, based on opinions, religiously, or what, it does not strip them from the same humanity that we have. So, but I vowed to save them. How? Soen Roshi said that, and Edo Roshi said that too. The only way to save anyone is to accept them as they are. Just so. And that seems so weak to some of us, but it's not weak at all, because what you have to bring to the table to be able to do that is a strength of presence, of embracing that divide that makes it into a true saving. Nonviolence. Remember, Dr. King adopted nonviolence. Where did he learn it? Who was his? Gandhi inspired him to that. What happened to Gandhi? He's such a peaceful guy, right? Huh?
He was shot to death.
He was shot to death. He was assassinated on January 30th, 1948. Who killed him?
Muslim? No.
A Hindu nationalist. Dr. King was murdered. So many were murdered. On the other hand, Gandhi wasn't a saint either. If you go back to Gandhi's writing of his early age when he was in South Africa, he wrote about that, yes, the whites should rule. The second most civilized are the Indian, and Africans are dirty and uncivilized. This country has another tradition that I want to mention to you. And that tradition is that this country, as a culture, often just knows two floors: the penthouse and the basement. If there is anyone Either they are way up there and they can't do anything wrong. And as soon as there's anything that is not that way, the elevator goes down, boom, and they're banished to the basement. The tearing down. Of course, it's important that we look at all of that. But what this exposes is that there is a fairly naive belief that there is something like sainthood or perfection. And it's so important in this practice here that we learn that the wonderful thing of these qualities that we might develop as human beings by looking deeply into the functioning of human nature and of the world is that it has the ability to cultivate, to evolve, purify. And that is the most amazing thing of all. If I look back at my life, I did horrible shit that I'm not proud of, from my point of view. But has it served me? Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Did I ever want to be a saint? Don't even think of that yourself. Or perfect. Oh, I want to be perfect. That leads to the belief, yes, I am perfect. And you know where that brings us. So this flawed human nature is our greatest asset that we have. Because it allows us to see what we have to do. Gandhi changed. He overcame his racism. And so it's important that we don't look at what happened in history from the point of view where we are standing now, having seen everything that came after, and then going back to it's a previous stage of evolution of a human being. Sometimes there are stages of devolution, where people deteriorate as they get older. But all of that is no reason to start tearing each other down. That's important to know. It's important at the same time to acknowledge those shortcomings and to not sugarcoat them, to be not somebody. The Zen tradition has a long history of hagiography. Everything is hunky-dory. No. Terrible things happened. You know why? Because these were human beings. What we can say for ourselves, I'm a human being. I will practice to step beyond my own self-centered intentions. And how do we do that? Watching carefully, stepping carefully, feeling deeply, looking deeply, acting generously, surrendering to gravity when gravity comes. And that's, in a nutshell, what practices like this here do. Dr. King practiced in his understanding when he came to visit India and went into the room where Gandhi used to sleep. Although he had been booked into a very fancy hotel, in that room he felt, I can feel the great soul. What is great soul in Sanskrit? Mahatma. Mahatma. I can feel, even so many years later. What happened is that he and his wife were brought cards and spent the night sleeping next to this fairly filthy mattress where Gandhi had slept. That is the other side of the permeability. So as we sit here and we take in the cries of the world, what does it make us? Bodhisattva Kanna. But more than that, we have to do this practice to metabolize all this anger, to metabolize all this hate, to metabolize all this disdain for the anger, to metabolize all the aversion to that hate, and bring it together in a modeling of what it means to be a human being that meets everybody with open arms, open heart, and then acts appropriately. Says, no, I'm not going to participate in that. And yes, I will see what the law can do for me and others to help to be not oppressed. All of that, but not out of a disdain, not out of opposition, but out of allegiance with the deep, shared, common humanity that is indivisible. I speak about this from a very deep root of having the faith in each of us. We can do this. And we can help everyone to do this. As soon as we step from a model that is solely based upon accounting for each other's shortcomings. Leave the deficit-based model behind. Don't see what's wrong with them. Don't see what's wrong with her, with him, with whatever. Start asking, what can I do to bring that arrested development back into motion? And if we do that, it makes all of you a mensch. So, tomorrow we'll have a Jukai ceremony. I haven't intended it to be alternative programming, but you could see it that way if you want, to certain inaugural kind of things that are going on tomorrow. If you don't want to watch that, you can come here at 9 o'clock. And then we have an abbot's tea tomorrow too, so you can come, we can sip some tea and exchange some pleasantries. This world is amazing. And what's most amazing in it is that it brought you here. It brought you here. Please take strength and inspiration from each other. This is just another step forward. Offer yourselves up in your kindness, in your openness to whatever human being you encounter. And we'll say it together next. In great four vows that are not just a chant, but the agenda for the next moment of our life.